Alright, so in this video we're going to basically use all of the tips and tricks that we have with Visual Studio for creating a MVC app that does CRUD using Entity Framework and LocalDb. So we did this in class. That's the repository. Never did sync back up to that. I'm going to do it from scratch though for the several people whose computers failed to do what they asked them to do. And so hopefully this can go a little bit smoother than it did in class. Let us begin. So very quickly, I'm going to go with the repository first, then down to the local machine, and then add to it route. So new repository, MVC talking to EF code first, and stuff. Don't know. Git ignore for Visual Studio. Sure, create a README and create repository. Alright, clone and download. Open Visual Studio. Yes, I do want to open Visual Studio. Choose a directory. Clone, choose it, and create a new solution. So this time we're going to go with a web application. MVC EF code first CRUD. Sure. Location is not there. It is here. Create a directory. It's not a new Git repository. Web application. Go. Alright, so in here, I'm going to start with an empty web app, but I am going to add all the stuff for MVC to it. I'm not going to use authentication, and I'm not going to host it in the cloud. So the good news is I can speed up this part over here. The bad news is that I accidentally hit mute on my microphone, so I have to re-narrate everything else in the rest of this video. So here I was looking for, I was just explaining that controllers, models, and views are created. There wasn't anything inside them. I was also showing that there was no bootstrap added, and I guess I moved the mouse around a lot. And then I decided to save changes, so I could see the differences between what I had done and what I was going to do next. I could see just those changes. Entering a quick commit message. Commit. Now I'm going to go add Entity Framework. This is where a reference to Entity Framework would show. It shows up there at the top. At the top, there, right above that Microsoft. It's not there right now, so we're going to go add it. I'm going to use the NuGet Package Manager. This is the graphical version. There is a command line version as well that many people like to use. I'm going to switch over to the Browse tab and type in Entity Framework. All one word, although I believe two words works as well. The first one there with 21.1 million downloads is the right one, 6.1.3 currently. It asks me, hey, are you sure you want to do this? And asks me to accept the license. I say yes to both of those things. And now when I go check the references, there's Entity Framework. Alright, next up is to add some models. These are the tables that we will be adding. I'm just going to add one. Now in a real version you would probably have different classes for different things. In order to speed things up, I am going to put everything in the same file. So I'm going to call the file models.cs, but I'm going to stick a bunch of other stuff inside there. So our example during class was on planets. Before that it did books, but we'll do planets again, I believe. In this case I'm calling it the singular planet because this is an object that references exactly one thing. The first thing I do is add an ID key, which planet ID. You could also just call it ID, but I prefer to put the noun repeated in the primary key. Entity Framework uses the fact that it's the first ID key to call it the primary key and make it an auto-incrementing number. And I'm just going to give it a name. That's it for this class. So for the purposes of speed, I'm just going to add my context class over here. However, I don't remember how exactly to write a context class, so let's go search the web. DB Context Entity Framework tutorial. I found several results. I'm just going to open several of them and then take a look at them as they load. Our first one lucked out. That looks like a perfect example. I know what I'm looking for because I've seen it before, but I can never remember it the next time I need to use it. I'm going to take that class and reuse it in mine and just rename some stuff. So I copy this guy and I send it over to my code, paste it, and change the name. We're going to go with planet context. Okay, now this DB context comes from Entity Framework, but we haven't got the using in place, so I'm going to have Visual Studio help me with that. Now we have no more squigglies. Also, this has got multiple entities. I only need one for my planets. Now, I made a mistake here, which I'll discover later on, which is that I didn't rename categories to planets. And now we're going to build. And next up, we're going to save our changes, commit our changes, just to see where we're at. I use the phrase work in progress, WIP, to mean something. I don't know if it works or not, but I'm just saving it because I might need to come back to it later. So at this point, we have our entity and our context defined, but we don't have any way of getting data into or out of the database. So for that, we're going to do some scaffolding. Scaffolding is creating stuff to do CRUD for you. So Visual Studio has this wonderful thing where you can right-click, add, new scaffolded item, and you choose this MVC5 controller with views using Entity Framework. Click Add. So from here we'll choose our context class and we'll choose our model class. We'll say, yes, I want to generate the views. I want to include jQuery and all that good stuff, validation, bootstrap, etc. Going to use the default layout page, and then it gives us a default which is a pluralized version of the model. In class we had a problem where we had both a planet and a planets controller, so be wary of that. Alright, I'm going to use the pending changes screen to see what all it did. So it added Bootstrap, it added a site.css, it added jQuery, some validation stuff, including the unobtrusive validation. It added 5 views and a default view, and way down the bottom it added the controller, pluralized, you'll notice. Lots of wonderful, beautiful stuff. I'm going to go ahead and commit all this stuff. Alright, so now we're ready to build it and run it. Okay, so this is because we created a planets controller, not a home controller, and it's still defaulting to home. So instead we can put in planets. And here's our scaffolded web page. So we can put in some planets for here. So let's put in some Mars, Earth. See, both of them are showing now. And Tatooine. Taking a look at some of the views and the controllers that were created. Take, for example, the planet controller down here. Alright, I started walking through. So the index returns db.categories. Whoa, what's categories? I just found out that I missed something. What I was trying to say is that it would just bring back a list of the planets, but I got confused by the word categories being there. So I went looking for where the heck, and oh yeah, duh. So having solved that mystery, I went back to looking at the controller's code that was generated for us. So let's see, details, just a bunch of detail. This is the create, so this is insert. It's basically saying, hey, you give me a planet, I'm going to add it. This is the edit. This is the one that says go find something by ID, and if you find it, then return the view. Then there's another one which is the same edit, but this time it's posting back a planet. And I was a little bit surprised by this. It's using something called attached versus detached state. That may not be the way that I would do it the first time, but that definitely works. And so on and so forth. The next question then was, so we added these rows to a database. Where the heck is the database? So first of all, we check in web.config to see if there was a connection string added. And there's a thing that says, here's entity framework, but there is no connection string section. So then we go check out the context class. And the context doesn't give any clues. Normally there would be a connection string passed in over here, but there isn't one. So what's happening here is Entity Framework is pretty aware of what you're trying to do. So it goes looking for a place to stick your database, and it ends up sticking it here in app data. And it's not included in the project, so it's a hidden file. And then we can go and take a look at it with Server Explorer. Ooh, and I had a bunch of leftover stuff from previously that I deleted. Okay, so we click add data connection, and first we're trying the server name dot. There's a possibility that this might work. Turns out it's probably related to running SQL Express rather than running LocalDb. Now if you do have SQL Express on your machine, Entity Framework will use it, which caused some confusion. But in this particular case, I do not have SQL Express, so I get this error. So let's change this over to the magic string LocalDB, meaning the LocalDB engine, followed by the name of the LocalDB instance, which is MS SQL LocalDB, which is the name of the latest instance. The older ones were called V12 and V11 and stuff like that. So once we get that in there, we then go down to the select or enter a database name dialog box thing, and there's the list, and there's our planet context auto created for us by Entity Framework. And there's our data connection, which we can then expand, go into tables, and we'll find the planets table, which matches the planet entity. Notice that it did not use the word categories, instead uses the entity name, which is planet. And if we expand that, we can take a look at the columns. So there are the two columns that we had. We can show table data. This gives us a grid which we can enter data in, delete data, update data, add another row for another planet just to show that it's the same database. And now if we go to run the app, but hang on, before we run the app, let's fix that routing problem so that we start off with the correct name. So instead of the home controller, I'm going to make the planets controller the default, that is plural. That file is routeconfig.cs underneath the startup location. And then we build and run. And there's Venus that we entered in the database showing up for us. Okay, so we stop running and go ahead and save all of our changes. And commit all of our changes and send them up to the server.